Thank you all for being here this evening, this afternoon, and for the invitation to share a bit more about my research and to meet all of you. So I will talk mostly, I would say, about the Arabian Peninsula, which is where I specialize, but I'll also get into the question of Gulf-Germany relations because this has been a big focus of the research that I've been doing in the last months, specific to hydrogen investment projects and just sustainable energy as a topic for diplomacy, which the German government is quite interested in. I think a lot of German citizens are interested in as well. So you can already see from the beginning slide here, this is a picture I took at Expo 2020 in Dubai earlier this year, where a big theme of Expo 2020, which 2020, it was this year because it was postponed from the pandemic, but a key theme of Expo was sustainability, and this is something that you see increasingly across the region, a region that is known to be sort of the epicenter of hydrocarbon fuel production and the sort of dirty fuel system. So this is part of a much larger project then within the Arabian Peninsula across the region to try to reshape the world away from this image that that the Gulf is simply just a place of oil, which is sort of read only through its number one export here. You know, it is oil and petroleum and the sort of fossil vision of the region. So trying to reshape that story is a really important part of the identity projects that have been promoted in the leadership of these various countries across the Arabian Peninsula that I'm talking about. And for the most part, I'm going to focus on the GCC states, which is essentially all of the states on the Arabian Peninsula minus Yemen. So one of the sort of key themes to all of this work that I have been doing and trying to understand the Gulf investments in sustainability is that it taps into this bigger idea of what being modern means today. And being modern today means being green. There's just a really simplistic association that we have that fossil fuels and dirty energy, it's something of the past. And so if you are as anxious as many of these leaders are, wanting to be seen as modern, then it is incredibly important to try to associate oneself with these modern energy sources, which, as you can see from this graphic, are lovely solar panels and wind energy and hydropower, a number of other sort of alternative energy fuels besides fossil fuels. So you can see, as I say, across the region, I've been focusing on the cases of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. So you have plenty of this in Saudi. If anybody is following some of the big investment schemes that the government of Mohammed bin Salman have been promoting, much of that is increasingly starting to take on this idea of focusing on Saudi green investment. And these new Invest in Saudi campaigns are all increasingly being oriented around this idea of incorporating future energy in one way or another. So you've seen this also in Qatar, as I mentioned, where I've also been working. I won't talk about this too much, even though it's very much in the news right now. The stadium development projects from the very beginning, from when I first started working on this topic about 10 years ago, they were already talking about trying to build sustainable stadiums and incorporating environmental themes and topics into even the Qatar national vision. So there's sort of four pillars of the national vision, which you can see here on the screen. The fourth pillar being environmentalism. And here it's also sort of framed in this broader rhetoric about religion and commitment to religious ideals and protection of the state and the abundance that God has given us. So there is a lot of this sort of language and ideas of Western environmentalism, but it's being fused then with like local identity narratives of caring for the landscapes that God has given us. And this was from my very first trip to Doha was right after COP 18 in 2012, and the government had come very much under criticism for even hosting COP 18 in Doha, which probably sounds familiar right now with all the discussions about the World Cup and the very idea that Qatar could be hosting a sustainable World Cup championship is kind of impossible, but it's nonetheless been there for quite a long time. I'll focus today, though, on the case of the United Arab Emirates, which is where I have been doing most of my research. I visited a number of times this year to sort of wrap up a number of these projects. And I would say across the region, the UAE has the strongest sense of this environmental narrative. So every week you have Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. Expo 2020, as I said, was largely framed around sustainability. There's a huge number of sustainability themed projects that you see, even coming from the sort of state controlled Masdar Energy, future energy company, even to the energy ministry itself, talking about working toward this new energy era. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was back in Abu Dhabi for the major international oil convention that they have every year, and there it was all about decarbonization. So in the country, even in these oil conversations, they're increasingly grasping these ideas of sustainability, and trying to promote the UAE as this place, as this site to experiment with the future of sustainable living. And this is the same pavilion that you saw on the opening slide of this presentation, the Sustainability Pavilion at Expo 2020. And here you have this really spectacular presentation of these high-tech solar panels being put on display here, but then also being advertised across the country in all of these different media outlets, reverberating that image of Dubai going green, of the UAE going green, and of all of this being hyper modern. So this was a core theme in how these developments were being portrayed at Expo, that much of this was sort of framed around alternative energy. There was very little in the sort of direction of sustainability discourse that we might think of today around maybe degrowth or not building. Instead, the focus is really on, we need to build and we need to continue to build. We just need to use alternative energy, and that's sort of the solution to all of the woes that lie ahead in terms of the climate crisis. So a key part of this story that you have growing across the region is related to alternative energy, but for all intents and purposes, it's mostly solar energy that they have been focusing on. There's very little in the way of wind. There's some tiny hydropower projects that are essentially meaningless, but solar power has been a key focus, and you can see this in a number of different places. But there's a sort of spectacular element to the emphasis on solar power energy, and so the picture, I'll come back to that one from the Dubai case, but you have both of the Emirates, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. I won't go into the politics of how government works in the UAE, but I can in Q&A if people are interested. But in Abu Dhabi Emirate, they have just developed this brand new solar park, the Noor Solar Park, which, as you can see here from this, this is the National, this is the English language newspaper in the UAE. 3.2 million panels make it the largest single site for solar in the world. And there's often, as I've sort of done previous research on the idea of spectacle. Spectacle is about capturing the sort of evocative image, and it's often striving for a kind of superlative, the biggest, the most, and it tends to be very, very flashy, as you can see in the case of the Noor Solar Park. I haven't been able to visit Noor. I actually don't know if I could get in. I've tried to figure it out, but have not been successful. I have, however, visited this one. This is the Al Maktoum Solar Park in the outskirts of Dubai. And actually, I'll flip to this question. I'll come back to those pictures in a minute. This is the road to get out to Al Maktoum, and this is if you were in the center of Dubai, to drive to get to this point to the sort of center of the park, it would take maybe an hour or so. I think that would be about the distance from somewhere in the Dubai center. So we really are out in the desert, very far into the desert. And as you can see here, it's really big construction site. Tons of roads have been developed and lots of built infrastructure to get out there to this site. But yeah, I mean, as unkempt and disorganized as it may look in this particular picture, that's not the image that the government, the Sheikh of Dubai is not interested in portraying that. He's more interested in portraying this sort of sparkling image of order and clean, beautiful, sparkling solar park, and it is named for Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, who is the Sheikh of Dubai and sort of the main leader and father figure of Dubai. And so what you have in this particular case is this really strong association of the solar park with Sheikh Mohammed's identity, and a sort of fusion with the personality cult around Sheikh Mohammed. And so he even, this is a picture of him within the center, of him at the inauguration center, of the inauguration of the center within the center. And so you have a sort of hyper mediated image, and just a sort of glorification of the park as then a proxy for a glorification of the leader as the sort of progressive person who's trying to advance the UAE on this track of promoting sustainable energy. So as I said, it's not so sparkling and clean as that. And the other big challenge is that it's just in general not sparkling, and it's in general not working. It's most of the time covered with dust. So this is one of the very simple things that you would think that a lot of people who just have a basic understanding of geography would know, that yeah, you can't just put a bunch of solar panels in the desert and then you're good, even though many people do continue to ask me that. Sand is a major problem for many of these panels, and they get covered with sand. They had from the beginning intended to have some of these waterless cleaning technologies, as you can see from this image on the top right. This idea that you could just have these machines that clean the panels, but in reality, it's just men with brushes. And the other big challenge of all of this, and why just putting up a bunch of solar panels in the desert isn't a solution to anything, is that this is water intensive. And it's incredibly water intensive. The other big challenge with how this works in the Gulf countries is that a city like Dubai or Abu Dhabi, they're getting over 90% of their water is coming from desalination. Desalination is one of the most energy intensive processes or ways of getting water. So you have this heavy energy intensive act of desalinating the seawater, which in the case of Abu Dhabi, it's mostly burning natural gas. In Saudi, they're also burning like just straight coal, or they are burning oil. across the region, you have this really intensive hydrocarbon system that is being used to produce desalinated water, and then this is then going to clean these solar panels, which is it's not economically efficient, and in a lot of cases they simply when I visited here in January, they said they just simply couldn't really keep the things clean, and many parts of the park are just left completely inoperable or haven't even been started up yet, including the concentrated solar section of this park. So one of the things that you'll never find in the official statistics is actually how much energy is being produced at this park. You if somebody can find it, please tell me. I would love those numbers. But this is not public information. But you will see those numbers, as you saw here, right, of how many solar panels there are. And there's lots of boasting about those numbers of the capacity, of the solar capacity of the region. But by and large, this is a more accurate understanding of how solar is working in the Gulf countries. Which, again, it's not to say it couldn't work. It's simply that there's still a lot of barriers to making that sort of sparkling dream of solar a reality. Another piece of the spectacle that I think is worth talking about and moving us closer to the German relationship here is another sort of spectacle, and this is the Masdar City project in Abu Dhabi, which some of you may have heard about already. It was supposed to be this great eco city that was supposed to have a zero carbon footprint. And in this particular site, it was supposed to be like a model desert eco city. It's very much under construction now, and it just continues to be under construction. I've been visiting for now 10 years, and I can't say it looks overly different, other than it's still just this really big construction site. There are a few structures that are there now. So the sort of central areas of this sort of iconic image, where there's a local university that is housed in these. I think this is a view of the student dorms. And then you have the real major anchor site within Masdar is the Siemens building here, which you see, and there it's often sort of it's the very entrance of Masdar city, and it figures very prominently. The other structure is just a little bit outside of the core of Masdar is IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, has its headquarters there in Abu Dhabi. It's hard to get a proper picture of the structure, but that gives you a sense of it, even though the scale of how this sits in relationship to the other parts that are developed is difficult to capture, because it's just huge tracts of desert in between. But in any case, you have it on this site, like the solar power idea, this sense that we need to build in order to achieve this future. And I will leave this maybe to Q&A, but building is a key part. I'm going to come back to that. This is what I'll come back to the slides in a minute. Building is a key part to understanding how Gulf economies function and how Gulf political systems function, which is to build and to continue finding reasons to build. And so what these projects do is they then enable and they give a sort of green veneer to those construction projects. So coming back to this, and I think it's really important to start to understand then the relationship between Germany and the Gulf countries, is that it's not just a political relationship on high, it's also a corporate relationship. So Siemens has a huge presence in the UAE and also all across the Gulf region. It has quite a prominent role in many of these big construction projects, including also many of the Qatari stadiums. And I think this is an exhibit that I had visited a couple of years ago in Masdar, where this is just outside of that Siemens building. That you have this kind of partnership with the sort of German ministries who are trying to then advertise the Energiewende as a way to bridge these conversations and to use this conversation about the energy transition as a kind of tool of diplomacy. So this is a kind of close up of those two particular signs there, and this again, just a reminder, this is in the Masdar City Eco City project, just outside of the IRENA headquarters. And here you have this strong idea that Germany is a place that's investing in renewable energy and is trying to promote this particular transition. All right. This is another theme that you saw very strongly at Expo 2020 at the Germany Pavilion. Sustainability was just the entire pavilion, the whole story, the whole narrative at Expo was about Germany's commitment to sustainable futures, to alternative energy. So one of the first things you do when you enter the pavilion is you are invited to not quite jump into the ball pit, but you can go walk through and explore all these ideas for this sustainable future. So this is a message that the organizers of the Germany Pavilion were trying to communicate in the UAE as they had this opportunity at the expo. Interestingly, expo is the whole site. It's 3.1 or 3.4 square kilometers, if I have that right. I probably have that totally wrong. In any case, a huge site that was developed just for Expo. It's now being transformed into District 2020. Most of the pavilions on the site are being demolished, but this one, the Germany Pavilion, is one that was built to stay. And so that's another part of that narrative of sustainability, that we're doing this as a bigger project and part of our commitment to that future. Whether or not these things are green, whatever the message is in these types of projects, I think it is just really important to remember. As one of my coterie colleagues told me when I first started this research many years ago, that green or not, they're still just building glass refrigerators in the desert. And as somebody who comes from the desert, I've always understood the sort of precarity of using desert resources, and also simply transforming a desert landscape like Saadiyat Island here before it was built up into this spectacular place. There isn't really a commitment in the UAE, for example, to leave a place like this as desert, but the impetus is to build. With this, I think what's fascinating as well, in all of these efforts to rebrand and promote renewable energy, and the efforts of the Gulf governments to do this through lots of different channels, is that it is part of what I've started to call the sort of great rebranding of the oil industry, and trying to frame that in some ways like Total or Beyond Petroleum, that they are transforming themselves to energy companies, and getting a lot of this similar spectacle around solar power, and using that to sort of green the image of the major hydrocarbon producers. So this is something then that brings us back to that conversation about Germany-Gulf relations, because when the war started, the most recent iteration of the war started in February with the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February. And that immediate reaction within Germany to try to find new sources for gas and for other hydrocarbon sources, that Habeck, Chancellor Scholz, and others were immediately starting to embark on a number of high-level meetings with different Gulf governments, including the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. And many of these conversations were explicitly about natural gas and oil, but they were also expanded to include much more than that. And so here I sort of put the European energy crisis in quotations, because it looks like the German government has been able to secure enough gas for the immediate needs over the winter. But at the same time, I think we can change maybe where those quotation marks go and ask if this crisis is perhaps not so European, in the sense that if Germany has been able to get these stores, then this also means that there's a number of countries around the world who have not been able to compete with Germany and other major industrial countries that have been able to secure and set up those deals internationally, and are now facing major shortages. I think another key part of this whole story, though, is yes, there's this sort of bigger geopolitical inequality going on, but brought into all of these conversations about how Germany will overcome the energy shortfalls that were being foreseen after the Russian invasion and the sanctions on Russian hydrocarbons, is that these investments very quickly materialized around developing LNG terminals, which is, I mean, the Qataris could not ship these things by pipeline to Germany, so they need to have these terminals being developed. These terminals have, if you read the language about these terminals, they are framed as being, in the immediate term, in the short term, as being for LNG, but they will in the future be developed and promoted to receive hydrogen. And so we have this development and promotion in all of this around promoting Germany's investment in hydrogen energy as a key source of alternative energy into the future. Frankly, as an American, when I arrived in March, I was a little dumbfounded by this, because we're not talking about hydrogen in the same way in the United States. But this has been a key part of that way to then sort of use the LNG terminals as then a way to link up to the sort of and you have had this array of projects and investments in developing the hydrogen future for German industry. And I think it is important to remember that this is largely with the idea of promoting and supporting German industry at its core, right? That the major story around Germany is that these kinds of hard to decarbonize industries need an alternative approach. And because Germany has such a strong history and connection to industrialism, that hydrogen is being sort of seen as the way to save that. And this nationalist rallying around industry is a key part of promoting these investments in natural gas. So the government has also invested in this project on hydrogen diplomacy, because as many in Germany are well aware, you do not have the capacity to produce the hydrogen in a quote unquote green way on the basis of renewables here in Germany. That in fact you also need to think about how you're going to get other countries to produce the sustainable or the green energy that can then be used to create hydrogen. So the H2 Diplo project has set up a number of sort of beginning offices in a number of different countries around the world, places that are sort of seen as being potential sites of hydrogen export. Connected to this, then, has been a relationship that has been growing with the UAE and with Saudi Arabia. I'll just talk about the UAE for today, but the idea of trying to promote this the hydrogen diplomacy project, this is one angle to it, but there are also bilateral relations where you have these deals such as this new strategic partnerships of the hydrogen value chain, etc., between the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company and different German partners. And when Habeck visited the Gulf in the spring, and he went to the UAE, he didn't get oil from the UAE. That wasn't the topic of the conversation. The conversation was about hydrogen, and the conversation was about trying to promote the UAE's involvement and shipment of hydrogen. The point here, though, if you read the official press release, is that it says that it is going to be blue hydrogen from the beginning, but eventually it will become green hydrogen. I actually don't think I have a slide here explaining the difference, but blue hydrogen is essentially natural gas produced hydrogen. So natural gas is being used to produce the hydrogen, but then it's part of a carbon capture system, and so that's what makes it blue and not gray. Gray is just natural gas produced. Blue means it's attached to some kind of carbon capture and utilization project. And so in the case of the UAE, their CCUS, or carbon capture utilization and storage project, is basically it's just enhanced oil recovery. That's what the CCUS component is, but that makes it blue. In any case, lots of debate about exactly this, and how sustainable that really is. But the story of this partnership is that it will start as blue, and we will eventually, in an indefinite amount of time, transition to green. So this has really helped advance ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, their effort to promote this idea that they are a growing source for more sustainable and economic gas supply. As I said, this is a similar story in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Aramco has been developing, I would say, almost parallel type of project, where they are also trying to tap into the natural gas reserves, tie that up with some kind of CCUS program, and then use that to sort of boost this idea of selling blue hydrogen on the international market. So I have to be really short on this because I think I'm already out of time. If people are interested, we have another event that I'll be speaking at together with a number of colleagues from the SAP and Giga and IESS in Potsdam. So if anyone is interested, you can Google this. I think it's probably too fast here for the web link here on the bottom. But that is coming up in a couple of weeks if people want to hear a little bit more about hydrogen. So I'll just sort of leave that to the side for now. Coming back then to this the bigger geopolitical questions that I'm interested in, is what these future energy stories are actually doing, and how we're supposed to understand the political implications of this relationship. I think the most important thing to understand about this is that they sell something, right? As any narrative, as any political narrative does. They sell products, identities, political agendas, ideological agendas, institutional raison d'être. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the justification for these institutions to exist. And this is quite important. And this may seem overly simplistic in some ways, but I've gotten very frustrated over the years of just constantly hearing these solar power projects or other types of sustainability investments in the Gulf just being dismissed as greenwash. End of story. That's not the end of the story, right? That's the beginning of the story. That's when we have to actually say, okay, what kind of products are being sold here? What kind of identities are being sold here? What is the political agenda behind this? Why would you invest in these massive solar parks when they're just being covered with dust and sitting in the desert? What is the point? I don't know that I have any good answers other than they sell things, and there's certain people that benefit from them, and there's lots of ways that people use spectacle. So I can give piecemeal answers to that. But as I said, I think this is the greenwash cannot be the end of the story. It is the beginning. So let's leave aside greenwash and actually ask what those projects are actually doing. And this is sort of the bigger message that I've been trying to communicate in my work on the sort of post-oil futures and imaginations for the Arabian Peninsula, that these are questions that can't be reduced to just a simple story of greenwash, that these are fundamentally questions about political geography, which is not like, are they really green? Are they legit? Those questions to me are boring and useless in a lot of ways. Really, the questions of political geography are about who's getting what, when, where, how, and why. And those are tricky things. And those are things that demand that we investigate who the actors are behind this, and that we understand and we start to think about what kind of political order they are embedded within, or perhaps what kind of political order they are challenging. And here I sort of just loop back to this bigger question of that order and that system, where yes, I think we can all agree that we need to move beyond a world that is so dependent on natural gas or oil or hydrocarbons, that these are still challenges that have these major justice components to them. And sometimes those justice components appear at the micro level, and sometimes they appear at the macro level. And I think my position as a political geographer is always to keep those different levels and those different scales of justice and energy politics in focus. So with that, I will close and say thank you for your attention, and happy to hear Hai's comments or questions from anyone else here.